Good morning, friends. Hello. Hello there. How was everyone this morning? I'm gonna go. Don't mind me. We're we're back. It is another week here at beautiful 11:11. So glad you're here with us. Hope that the day is finding you well and that there's goodness in it. I know we're a couple minutes late. We continue. We'll get there someday. There's only when I try to go live, there's only so many livey things that we can do. Hi, Kristen. Good morning. Hey, I finally did get uh, the flyer changed to the time on it. It was you know everything's harder than you think it is, but I did get it changed. So if you wanted to go post that with Viva Fall River, that would be awesome. You'd be my hero for the day. Karen, good morning to you. I hope things are well. Hope you're staying dry today. Donna, good morning. Hope you're doing good. Um, Hope mom's dentist appointment went well, and Phyllis is doing good. Hi, Phyllis. Glad to see you here as well. So welcome, welcome. Glad you're a part of this little day and this journey. So, good morning, everybody. My little, little Matthew cup here. They got like it's always a good reminder. So, because if anybody can talk me into the idea that it's all just me, I'm the guy. So, welcome this morning. Hey, Irene. Good morning. Hello, Charlotte. Oh my goodness, what a blessing! Hang out with Charlotte today. So, speaking of blessings this morning, just before we get going, right now, if you know Brendan and Kaylee, Kaylee is I just happened to as this as this Providence has it. I just happened to text Brandon this morning to say, how are things going? And Kaylee is in labor this morning. They are at the hospital doing the thing, and so please pray for them and pray for baby McInerney that is finding its way into the world, and so that's such a blessing and a joy. So you know. So please keep them in your prayers today. It looks like we're going to have a pie baby, 314. That is it being Pie Day. And also, please keep Vicky in our prayers. I don't know if you've heard, but her dog, who's just such a dear part of her life, Macy, passed this last week, and it's such a tough time, and so she's still struggling with the grief and all the incumbent griefs that come with it, and then all the different things that inevitably seem to go wrong with life when we find ourselves in vulnerable places. So anyway, I just ask that you keep Vicky in your prayers today too. So all right, let's get going. It is 3:14 this Tuesday at 11:11, and I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're with us. Roselia, good morning. I'm so glad you're here. That we might come and gather one more week, one more time. That as we actually inch up on the third anniversary coming up of 11:11, in which we started gathering in this little space and spending time together. What a joy that is. So wherever you find yourself and wherever you are, welcome today and this hour. It is Pi Day, so I want to talk a little bit about, well, pi, but that pi is this number that just keeps going on. It is the eternal number, if you don't know. So that pi is as a mathematical figure, not a math guy, but I do understand simply that the number pi, as it relates to the circumference of a circle and all that sort of stuff, actually has no end. That if they've tried to solve it out to hundreds and thousands but it's kind of an eternal number. And in that way, it's kind of one of the most interesting numbers in the world. And so we're so we're so so it's So there's a little bit of when we come to Pi Day, we come to a little bit of eternity. But we also come to Pi Day. It's also sweetness. We like pie. I know Irene is a pie judge from way back. We get the opportunity to spend our day in sweetness. And so I think there's something beautiful about this day, about the sweetness of it, and about the eternality of it. That it all kind of gets mashed up in a way that we can say today is Pi Day. In that, I want to think about what it means for us to encounter the sweet and the eternal in our life. Like, how do we open up a space to embrace that? How do we open up a place for, in the midst of our struggles, for goodness and for eternality, for the wisdom that just keeps unfolding in life, that doesn't ever end? That whole point that some of us had, we come to it at different points in our life, but that we all figured at some point that we would have it figured out, right? Like some point in your life, you were like, okay, I'm going to get to this place in my life and I'm going to be established. I'll kind of figure out all the things. I'll know what to do in all the situations. I'll have a mastery of what it is to be a living person in this world. And we come to discover that even though we do gain mastery about things, and we do become grown-ups on the scene, and we do have the ability to have strength and beauty and wisdom in the midst of our world. At the same time, every time you level up, the boss gets a little bigger. That every level of life, every phase of life, every season of life has its own challenges. And so in the midst of these challenges, that it still leaves us in this kind of feeling of a little uncertainty of our equilibrium, no matter how good we get at this thing. And so I'm convinced and that just like today is Pi Day, in the way that the eternality of things kind of unfold, so too does it forever. And that in it, we are going to keep coming back to our favorite highs, the sweetnesses of our days again and again and again. And the question is, how do we embrace those? How do we lean into them in such a way that we can see them? Often we're just we that feeling of, when we were younger, maybe when we just didn't know what we were doing, and now that we're older, we're just don't know what we're doing, with a little more gray hair and parts of our body that smell funny. That while that's not really true, because we do have capabilities and we do have wisdom that we gain, and we have strength of character that the Lord builds in us over time and over the world, it's still that when we get that wondering of, okay, how do we do this a little better? And so that's what I want to talk about today. All that to say this. I know I'm that guy. Like, well, I say all this to say that. Well, you probably have figured it out by now. All right. So, but I think it comes from, I think there's a little gem in this that comes from the book of Habakkuk, so Habakkuk is the 8th book of the 12 books of the minor prophets. Habakkuk was a prophet. He lived, the book was written right around 2,635 years ago. That's about 612 BC, right around there. So it's got a little age on it. And yet, I think when we start to listen to it, we can see in it the elements of God's operation in our life. I think there's just beautiful wisdom in this. So the first chapter of the book of Habakkuk is just complaining. So, which I think is the first chapter of most of our lives about most things. That whenever we encounter anything, we inherently encounter the kind of the problems with it, right? With every challenge, we're like, oh, that hurts. Oh, that itches. Oh, this is hard. Oh, I used to be able to do this. I can't do that anymore. We inherently look to the lack of a thing, right? I mean, and legitimately, the people of Israel have some lack to look at. Habakkuk has some complaints that he's a contemporary with Jeremiah. So this is the time when Jerusalem is overwhelmed and they're pulled out and they're dragged off to Babylon, and Daniel is getting stuck in the lion's den, and it's not a good time. And so he had legitimate questions, and the first chapter starts with how that famous line of "How long, O Lord, how long?" Like, how long are we going to have to suffer? How long until you go into action? How long until you save us? Which I think is a perennial question, no matter what our level and our place in this life. That there's always something that's just in this how long are we going to have to put up with? Are we going to have to suffer? And so he goes. And then the second chapter begins this way. It says, the first chapter is just complaining. And kind of illustrating what the problem is. I won't go into that. We all know what our problem is, and if we don't, it will show itself quite quickly in our life. The second chapter begins this: I will stand at my watch and station myself at the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me, and what answer I am to give to this complaint. So there's this shift. So Habakkuk's complained to God, said, okay, here's the problem. Here's how long are we gonna have to suffer? And he says, okay, now I'll listen. And there's this shift in state of I'm gonna watch and I'm gonna listen. So what do I do? That great, if you've ever seen the movie of The Apostle, it is a wonderful movie. It's an encounter with a lot of bad theology in a really beautiful way. It's Robert Duvall. I won't spoil it for you, but there's this marvelous scene where he screws a bunch of things up, and in the mistakes he's trying to figure out what he's going to do, and he's standing there in the rain just saying, "What do I do, Lord? What do I do?" It's such, if you, it's so relatable to each of us at some point in our spiritual journey. And this is kind of where Habakkuk is. He's laid out the problems. He says, "Okay, I'll stand at the ramparts. I will stand the place that where my appointed duties. I will stand in the dutiful place. And what is it? What am I to do? How am I to answer to all of this that's taking place?" And here's the Lord's answer. And this is I want to see if we can tease out what's really happening here. Because then the Lord replied, "Write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets, so that anyone that runs by can see it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it lingers, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. See, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous person will live by his faith." Write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets. It's if you read the first chapter of Habakkuk, how long, O Lord, how long? This seems like a really weird reply, or not even a weird reply, a really incomplete reply. Just write down the revelation. Okay, which is to say, write down where you want to go. Write down where it is you feel God is calling in your life. Write down where, and when I say God is calling, this is an intellectual thing. This is a desire of your heart. Like, where is it? What are you pinning on the wall? One way to say it is, what are your goals? What thing would you love to see happen in this life? What thing that would you love to be, or to create, or to have come into being in this life? What is the thing that is before you that God is calling you to do? What that is a part of your being? What is the revelation? See, are you seeing it now? The what is it that God has revealed to you, and make it plain on tablets, so that anyone who can read it that comes by can run with it. When we find ourselves in this place of struggle, we find ourselves on the struggle bus, we find ourselves in the midst of this, what Habakkuk is saying 2,635 years ago is to set a goal. And not just set any old goal, not say, I just want to lose 5 pounds or whatever, but to set a goal, to be the thing that you want to be in this world, to have the experience that you want to have in this world, to have to bring into being the revelation. Write down your goals. Because, and here's where it gets juicy and good and wonderful, is that the eternal, that God is at work in our goals. God is at work in the things that we want. God works with our wants. We think, we've been told, like God works in this moralistic way with us. That like, now you just behave better and you do the things that you're supposed to do, and then you'll have a better life. Like that, we've been lectured to over this idea that's how, that what God really has brought is this these truths of moral framework but that's not God. That's not creation. That's not how plants grow. That's not how children develop. That's not how we as humans come. That's not how every living thing in this world works. It's not. They're not held together with a moral framework, and that'd be the primary thing that they are. No. They are these desires, there's these passions, there's my dog Poco who, runs and puts the ball on my lap and wants me to throw it, and runs again and puts the ball on my lap and wants me to throw it again. It's filled with all this little ball of wants and desires to kind of come on the couch and snuggle with me. That God works with our goals, God works with our wants, God works with our desires in this way that when we pin something on the wall, when we write it down, the revelation that we have, when we scratch it out so that anybody who reads it can see it, when we do that, everything good goes to work. All the angels of our being, all the Holy Spirit goes to work on this. And that doesn't mean we're going to get it. It doesn't mean we're going to, but what it's doing, and this is the beautiful part, is what it's doing is that it's swapping out good goals for better goals. This is, you hear what I'm saying? That it says, for the revelation awaits at an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Well, what's the end? The end is Pi Day, that we might live in sweetness and, with the juice running down our chin, that we might live in sweetness, and that we might live in eternity, that we might live in the eternal, the 3.15, blah, 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 on to eternity. That it is Pi Day, that there's this day of sweetness, and there's this day of eternity, and that's what we're being held for. That's what we're being prepared for. That's what our Father in heaven, who wants to give us all good gifts, is at work in. And that when we set a goal, when we put a thing on the wall, when we write down a revelation that is a part of us, when we look at the things that we want in our life, and we will look at what we want our life to look like, when God not only works with the goals, but God, and not only works to give us good things, but works to make them better. Works to make them better. And this is true if you look at your life. Like maybe you got married because you were in love, or maybe you got into a relationship because you were in love, or you cared for somebody or something like that. But then if they endure, when they endure over time, I mean, some just, they aren't matches and they don't work out. But when they do, there's actually things that you discover in there. There are treasures that you discover in there that you never thought you'd get in other ways. And some of them you don't even necessarily like. Why don't we like them? Because of that last bit. See, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous person will live by his faith. The enemy isn't out there. The enemy isn't somebody out there. The enemy, when that's, I'll spare us the kind of the word, the didactic of the wording, but this whole idea of being puffed up, when you find it in the Old Testament, it's talking about us being kind of filled with our own hot air. With our own bloviating, our own kind of looking like a Macy's Day Parade about, how great we are or how wonderful we are, of our own inflated sense of worth or of self-reference or self, and that actually the pursuit of our goals is actually the thing that God is sometimes undermining. So that even, and this is the beauty of it, you see, even if you start out with a goal that is a really maybe a kind of a crappy goal, or what we would call a goal that doesn't that doesn't that may not be particularly spiritual. Like, okay, so I want to lose 20 pounds so that I can fit in my tuxedo. Like, I had a goal for that for a while. For a whole bunch of reasons, it hasn't come by. And part of that is because I want to look good, because I'm vain, and because I'm a human being, and because I have that tuxedo and it hangs in my closet, and I don't fit into it for a while, and then I want to lose that weight just so I can stand in front of a mirror and say, yeah, you sexy thing. Like, that you can just, so that I can just have this moment of like, now that's not a great goal in terms of what's underlying. Like, there's not deep spiritual meaning in that. That's actually a pretty base goal in a lot of ways. However, and you know this to be true. When you know this to be true, you've all set goals in your life. You've watched this play out. That if I were to engage in that, and if I were to really take up the discipline of what it meant and I will, it's these things go in cycles for me. I'm sure as they do for you. But as you work them out and as you begin to find treasures along the way. You begin to be formed in more beautiful ways that have nothing to do with our physical appearance. But actually, we begin to gain some self-discipline again, and we begin to be able to hold other things that are actually more beautiful and more important. We actually begin to, when that a little bit of capacity in one area actually allows us capacity in another area. That not only am I just going to be dead sexy in front of the mirror, but I'm actually going to be a better pastor, and I'll be a better husband, and I'll be a better father. And I'll be more aware in some ways because I won't necessarily be stuffing a brownie in my face every day. That there's all of these incumbent things that God starts to work with, that the Spirit starts to gain to us when we set a goal, even if it's not a noble goal, even if it's not the high country of spiritual experience. We build this up. Habakkuk is in the dirt. He is in the lost place. His tank is empty. And what God is telling him to do is to take the revelation that he's implanted in him, which, by the way, for Habakkuk, it is go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. It's go back and create and go back and make life happen again. Go back and create a holy center once again, even though everything's been wiped out. That's the vision that God, it doesn't say it in the text, but that's the vision that God has implanted in him. So take that revelation, write it down, and go move towards it. That never happens for Israel. But there's all kinds of more beautiful things that do happen for Israel, including the coming of the very Christ himself. You see, friends, this whole eternal Pi Day journey, this whole journey of sweetness into eternity, is one that God will work with anything that we can move towards and will put towards. God will work with the desires of our heart. God will work with the griefs of our heart. God will work with the joys of our days. God will work with the consternation of our days. In all of it, God's love and God's grace for each one of us is playing itself out, and it's in a fingerprintly unique sort of way, but it is working itself out nonetheless. And that when we pin something on the wall that God's calling us to, everything else can open itself up into more beauty and more grace and more strength and more courage and more wonder and more wisdom than we ever could have imagined by just setting a simple mark on the wall. My hope for you today is that you will you will write down that revelation and make it plain. Whatever it is that God's calling you to do, whatever thing that's before you, and maybe it's a short one. Maybe it's put on your fuzzy bunny slippers and make some coffee. I don't know what it is. I don't know what your capabilities are. I don't know where you are. But to simply set something before the wall about how you are and who you are and where you want to be in this world. And in that and surrounding that, all the hosts of heaven go to work. All the very work of the Spirit and God's hand upon your life swings into action. And that all those places, the things, those puffed up places that are a part of your life that are trying to destroy you, your own ego, your own self perception, your own belief about what and who you think you are, all of that. God is in the business of stripping away if we'll just simply have a little faith and keep walking towards the beauty of Pi Day, the sweetness and the eternal of life. All right, friends, that's my hope for you today, and we'll pick it up tomorrow. Hi, Vicki. I'm glad you made it. Jane and John, hello. Glad you're here. Cheryl Furs, everybody. Yay. Glad you're here, Cheryl. All right. Thank you, Karen. Happy Pi Day to you too. I hope you all are having a blessed and beautiful day, and that you know in it some of the sweetness and the eternal. And we'll pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11.